But it is so hilarious that this elephant deity travels around on this tiny little rat called, the rat's name is Mushika. Travels around on the rat, and what that symbolizes is that is his desire. We back, y'all. I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on this podcast, but I'm trying to get the word chawl started. A buddy of mine, or really a friend of a friend in Seattle, was trying to get the word started about 2014. And then he stopped, but I picked it up in like 2017. I was like, no, I think we can get that word started. And then COVID came around. Everybody's got their COVID projects. Mine was getting chawl started, which is kind of like a mix between y'all, chawl, chill. And it's kind of just I think we're all aware that the word dope it's not really in anymore. It's kind of had its day. But we don't have a good replacement, and chawl is that replacement. In this episode, this reflection today, it's going to be chawl. And that is because we are talking Ganesha today. Ganesha is this little half elephant, or he's a little boy with an elephant head, and sometimes depicted as a full-on adult with an elephant head. Usually pudgy, so well-rounded, and he's got his two arms in different positions depending on the statue. But I've mentioned this on the pod before, that for the first 9 years of going deep into this philosophy, I didn't care about the symbolism of these different statues, the different lowercase g gods of this philosophy. This philosophy it's the original monistic philosophy, monism, being oneness, the philosophy of oneness. And it is funny that 1,000 years later you have variations, interpretations of this philosophy that then has all of these polytheistic approaches. But Hinduism at its core is monotheistic, and Hinduism is built about 1,000 years later, about 800 years later, after the Upanishads. The Upanishads being monistic, meaning oneness, non-duality, a non-dual approach to where it's not monotheism. Monotheism is one God. This goes even further removed from polytheism as many gods, monotheism as one God. Monism is just oneness, or non-duality is how it's often articulated. Non-duality, Advaita, is the Sanskrit word for non-dual. So Advaita Vedanta is the non-dual end of knowledge. Vedanta means end of knowledge. The oneness at the end of all knowledge. The oneness at the culmination of all knowledge. I've mentioned before that the reason that Advaita is the word, non-dual is the word, is because not two is the word, is because oneness gets 97% of the way there, but it does imply that there's a border. If there is oneness, even just visually how we imagine oneness, you go to the edges and there's an implication of a border, but not two does not have that tiny little limitation to it. So it's a slight refinement on oneness. But oneness, unity, these words are often used as well. And they're all in the camp of just language will always fail when pointing at the infinite. Language will always fail. So it's almost like these are all just pointers, not meant to be taken too literally, because they are really pointing at something that transcends anything to do with language. Having said all of that, but in addition to language, and language is the medium in which this philosophy resides. It is linguistic, it is principle-based, it's conceptual in many ways. And the language of this philosophy, oftentimes written down, something like an Upanishad. There's many Upanishads. There's about 108 primary Upanishads. There's about 10 that are the most cited, the most revered. And within those Upanishads, these are philosophical texts that sit at the end of the Vedas, the 4 philosophical textbooks called the Vedas. The Upanishads are the crystallized, most succinct, concise versions of the philosophy. This philosophy, and it's another word for, or another meaning behind Vedanta, is end of the Vedas. So it means end of knowledge or culmination of knowledge, but it also is a nice pun because it means the end of the Vedas, and that's where the Upanishads sit. I've covered this a handful of times before on the pod. But within the Upanishads, one might be 13 verses, one might be 80 verses. They're very, very concise. 13 verses, the whole philosophy encapsulated, 13 verses. Very, very concise, but also very cryptic. It's not something that you could just read and say, I know exactly what this is pointing at. It's like reading equals MC squared. Extremely concise, but I'm not even going to pretend to know what all of that means. Even if I could look up and simply recite what each one of those variables means, I have no idea the depth within the cryptic symbolism of something like E equals MC squared. I just take it as an accurate partial description of certain phenomena in our world because, well, other really smart people said it's accurate. It's kind of how I looked at the symbolism of these deities, these lowercase g gods. They're basically just symbols that, to any sophisticated approach to Vedanta, none of them are meant to be taken literally or too seriously. They are just symbols pointing to something beyond themselves. Like an Upanishad that's cryptic with 13 or 35 verses, the imagery of Ganesha is cryptic. It's like, okay, why is it an elephant head? Why are the ears so large? Why is there a snake for a belt? Why has he got a little rat right there? And for years, it just was not interesting. I don't have a pull to different Upanishads. But I will say, Ganesha has friggin' grown on me. And it's all because of this little... But I will say, these statues, these symbolic pointers that are three-dimensional in form instead of 13 verses on a piece of paper, you have this three-dimensional form that is an Upanishad, but in a statue, in something like Ganesha. The thing that I've been reflecting on lately is that every one of these deities, Ganesha or Shiva, they have vehicles that they ride around on or that they keep nearby. And the vehicle for Ganesha is the rat. For Shiva, it's a bull, and it's its own cool symbolism. The bull just works. Doesn't ask for a raise, isn't thinking about getting paid, isn't thinking about reward. The bull is a perfect symbol of our approach to our development, what that approach should be, where it's just working. The bull works all day, every day, never asking what is in it for me, just working. The bull carrying the plow behind it on the farm, for example, just working all day. And for Ganesha, it's a little rat or a mouse. Some interpretations and statues have it as a little mouse, some as a little rat. But it is so hilarious that this elephant deity travels around on this tiny little rat called, the rat's name is Mushika. Travels around on the rat, and what that symbolizes is that is his desire. He still has some desires. Ganesha is seen as an enlightened deity. Again, just a symbol of pointing towards enlightenment. No one is thinking that Ganesha is a literal being anywhere. It's just a symbol. I won't say no one. I'm sure some people think that, but the sophisticated approach to this philosophy does not think any of these are real. They are all just pointers. But the symbolism of his desire being embodied in a rat, and he's often seen as just giving little morsels of food to the rat, to Mushika. But the imagery here, the symbolism is that it's tiny. His desire is small. and he uses it to get around, but it's completely under control. The desire is not some roller coaster that he's riding on, like it is for many of us. It's this tiny little vehicle that he uses. He rides Mushika around anywhere that he needs to go. Another interesting aspect of his little vehicle is that it's said to be able to take Ganesha anywhere. He can get into the tiniest little crevices. He can shrink down to fit in the tiniest corners of the world, meaning that if you have your desire, and sometimes it's interpreted as ego, if you have your desire, your ego, under control, if you're the rare one in a generation that has their desire completely under your control, your ego completely in check, you can go anywhere. You can go into any tiny dark corner of the universe. You can go anywhere, and Ganesha is often just stationary, not needing to go anywhere. You can go and serve anyone that needs your service. You can go and serve any dark corner. You can go and travel to any far-flung place, but you can also just sit there. Ganesha keeps desire around, keeps the ego around, but is not governed by it. He transcends it. He rides it. He is quite physically above it. But he does keep it around in the same way that an enlightened soul still has desires for food or for shelter, but it is not governed. That being is not governed by those. Take food and shelter away, they're totally fine. Completely fine, because they are above it all, above those desires. They would use those desires if there was service oriented. They eat so that they can perform a lecture later that night. They pursue any of the selfless desires that you and I could imagine. Selfless desire for our liberation, selfless desire for the propagation of a philosophy that they know will help others. Some have those selfless desires, some don't have those selfless desires. There's basically every flavor of selfless desire. Some is a selfless desire to go up to the Himalayas, to the caves, and just sit, letting all of the rest of their karma run out. Or, said more technically, their prarabdha vasanas, letting them run out. And it's a selfless desire to put one step in front of the other, to go to the Himalayas, and to not get entangled or do any damage to the world around them with any other types of desire, selfish desire being the other type. I should do an episode on the differences between selfish desire, unselfish desire, and selfless desire. But suffice it to say, even for the enlightened one, they are no longer there, but their body, their mind exists and rides around, driven by a desire for this action or this action or this action. The distinction between them and us, the distinction between Ganesha and that symbolic representation in us, is they control their desires. They are not governed and thrown around by their desires. I'll speak for myself, my mind is thrown around by desires or interrupted desires. And those desires are so much more often than not selfish desires for stability or validation or wanting to help others selfishly because, wow, that makes me feel so good. That makes me feel so useful when I am helping. It's one of the strangest, most selfish ways of why someone might teach. And we are all subject to desires jumping in the driver's seat and taking control of the wheel because we don't have desire under control. Like an enlightened being, like Ganesha, the symbolism of wisdom. However, for them, for wisdom, the symbolic form of wisdom, they have that under control. They ride it around. It's their pet. Tiny in stature, sublimated, meaning they are above it, but there and used as a tool instead of being used by it. Riding the rat. Ganesha, you dog. I really just thought, all right, I'm never going to get into those three-dimensional representations of this philosophy. And yet I find myself thinking about these little vehicles. The orientation, the symbolism of all of these different aspects of statue or a mythological form. And it is a three-dimensional Upanishad. It is a visual ideal to work towards, to where desire is tiny in form, transcended, useful, but not the thing that's using me, that's throwing me around, but something that is under control. And that is today's reflection on the Daily Vedantic. We'll see you next time.